Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. It started on a Thursday night at a company dinner I wasn't supposed to be at. I'd stopped by to pick up Emma after a late client meeting of my own, thinking I'd just say hello to her coworkers and leave. The restaurant was dim, loud, full of laughter that didn't sound real. When I walked in, she was standing near the bar with her boss, Greg, both of them glowing under the soft lights like they belonged there together. He leaned in close, said something that made her laugh too easily. Her hand brushed his arm, almost rehearsed. When she saw me, her smile didn't falter. It just changed. "This is my husband, Nate," she said. "He's an architect. Very steady." Greg smirked. "Steady's good. The world needs steady people." There was a beat of silence I didn't fill. I just nodded, and for some reason, that felt like the first time I'd gone quiet in months. We drove home without speaking. Her phone buzzed twice in the cup holder, the screen lighting up with Greg's name. She didn't notice, or pretended not to. When we pulled into the driveway, she broke the silence first. "It's just networking," she said, her voice sharp, defensive. "You wouldn't understand. It's about positioning opportunities." That word, positioning, stuck like glass in my chest. I'd spent years designing spaces that would last for generations, and she was chasing rooms that could vanish overnight. Later, I watched her get ready for bed, her reflection framed by the soft glow of the vanity mirror. She sprayed on the same perfume she always wore, the one that used to mean home. Now it just smelled like distance. I sat on the couch, half watching something on Netflix, the noise filling the silence she left behind. Her phone pinged again. She didn't move. She just scrolled through her messages, smiling faintly, as if she'd already moved into another life. That night, I didn't argue. I didn't ask who Greg was to her outside of work. I simply watched her walk past me, confident that nothing would ever shift. But she was wrong. Something had already cracked. The next morning, while she grabbed her usual Starbucks on the way to the office, I drove to Home Depot. I told myself I was picking up materials for a new project. But really, I was building the first wall between us. Over the next week, the distance between us became a routine. She'd leave earlier than usual, saying she had morning briefings with Greg. Her voice always carried that professional tone, detached, efficient, like I was a client she'd already closed. I didn't question her. I just watched. I noticed the new blazer, the brighter lipstick, the confidence that came with being noticed by someone powerful. She wasn't hiding it. She didn't need to. At home, I started staying later at the office, drafting blueprints that didn't exist, sketching structures I didn't intend to build. It was the only way to keep my hands from shaking when I thought about what she was trading for new opportunities. I told myself I was being paranoid. But then her phone buzzed again one night while she was in the shower. I didn't look at the messages, just the preview. "Greg, same time tomorrow." That was the confirmation I didn't want but already knew. I didn't feel rage. Just a slow, steady clarity. She had been withholding affection for months, rationing warmth like it was currency. Now I understood why. She wasn't just drifting, she was calculating. And I realized I could do the same. The next morning, she left her half-empty Starbucks cup on the counter. I threw it away without a sound. Then I opened our shared bank app. I didn't transfer everything, not yet. Just enough to remind myself that the balance of control could shift quietly. I started taking jobs out of town. A development on the edge of the city, near the river. It required early mornings and late nights, the kind that gave me reasons not to answer her calls. When she texted to ask if I'd be home for dinner, I replied simply, "Busy." I didn't lie, but I didn't explain either. That was new for me. I'd always overcommunicated, always tried to keep things smooth. But silence, real silence, had its own kind of power. By the end of that week, she was already frustrated. She told her sister that I'd become distant, that I was probably in one of his moods again. Maybe I was. But this time, my mood had direction. I wasn't reacting. I was redrawing the blueprint of my own life, one line at a time. I used to believe that proof would bring closure, that once you saw the truth, you could decide what came next. But when it finally arrived, it didn't feel like clarity. It felt like quiet collapse. It was a Thursday again, almost 3 weeks after that dinner. I'd stopped by her office to drop off her forgotten planner, something she used for every deal she managed. When I walked in, she wasn't at her desk. Her assistant mentioned she'd gone to lunch with Greg, saying his name like it was perfectly normal. I left the planner and stepped back outside, but as I crossed the parking lot, I saw them through the glass wall of a nearby cafe. Not holding hands, not kissing, just close. Too close. She leaned forward, laughing softly, touching her hair like it was a reflex. The kind of gesture you make when you're trying to be remembered. I didn't go in. I just stood there, watching from across the street, until my phone buzzed, a delivery notification from Amazon. Something she'd ordered with our shared account. A bottle of expensive cologne I'd never worn. That night, she came home late. Said she'd been closing a deal. I just nodded. No confrontation, no accusation. I started dinner, washed the dishes, and went to bed early. The next morning, I transferred my direct deposits into a separate account. Not to punish her. To prepare. I spent the weekend at Home Depot, buying supplies for a side project I hadn't told her about. A renovation for a client who wanted something quiet but lasting. I understood that. I wanted the same thing. She noticed the shift but couldn't name it. Asked if everything was okay. I said yes, in the same even tone she used to explain away her absences. At night, she scrolled through her phone while I sat beside her, both of us pretending to share the same silence. But in my mind, I'd already started to move. Every plan, every bill, every shared responsibility. I was quietly removing myself from it all. She thought she'd taken control by withholding intimacy. She didn't realize I'd learned from her. I could withhold, too, everything she took for granted. One morning, I decided to stop making noise. No warnings, no explanations. Just stillness. She woke up to the same routine, coffee brewing, makeup bag open, phone glowing with messages. I used to make her breakfast, small things that said, "I'm here." That morning, I didn't. She noticed, but didn't say anything. She'd grown comfortable with my silence, thinking it was passivity. She mistook calm for surrender. When she left for work, I didn't ask when she'd be back. I didn't check her calendar or her tone. Instead, I called my project manager and requested to be reassigned to a site out of town for the next 2 months. A quiet residential build outside the city. Just me, blueprints, and silence. I told no one else, not even her. By noon, I'd packed enough clothes to fit in the back of my Silverado and left. No confrontation, no farewell. Just an empty driveway and the faint smell of her perfume in the hallway. On the road, I stopped at an IHOP I used to drive past every day but never entered. The waitress called me Han, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. The pancakes tasted like something steady. I stayed longer than I planned, watching people talk about small, ordinary things. When she texted later, "Where are you?" I waited an hour before replying. "Working." She sent 3 more messages after that, then called. I didn't answer. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. Over the next week, I disconnected everything tied to us. The shared credit cards, the automatic payments, even the Netflix account she watched every night while waiting for me. She'd notice eventually. I wanted her to. By the end of that week, she'd call me 9 times. Each voicemail sounded different. First calm, then confused, then angry. But I didn't respond. I wasn't gone. I was just somewhere she couldn't reach anymore. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. She'd built her new life on the illusion that I would always stay. Now she was learning what it felt like when the foundation finally moved. From the distance, I could see everything unravel quietly. It started with small signs, her posts on social media growing more polished, her captions sounding like job applications. Then came the rumors. A friend from the city called and mentioned, in that careful tone people use when they think they're protecting you, that Greg's sudden promotion had drawn attention. Apparently, someone had found irregularities in his property listings. Numbers that didn't match, clients that didn't exist. Nothing public yet, but the kind of whispers that spread fast in real estate. I didn't plan to get involved, but I knew how to read blueprints, and I knew how to find weak points. Greg's business model had plenty. It didn't take much, just a few forwarded documents, a quiet email sent from an anonymous account, highlighting inconsistencies he thought no one would notice. I didn't sign it, didn't trace it back. I simply watched. Within a week, he started cleaning up his online presence. She didn't see it yet, still clinging to his confidence like it could protect her. But in the office, people began to distance themselves. Meetings were shorter. Conversations stopped when she entered the room. I never said a word to her. I didn't need to. Every system she joined was turning against her, not because of me, but because of how fragile her foundation really was. While she scrambled to prove her worth, I focused on my project. Long hours at the construction site, the steady rhythm of work replacing everything I'd lost. I'd stop by Home Depot in the evenings, picking up tools I didn't strictly need, just to feel control in my hands again. The men there spoke in short sentences, direct and simple. No pretenses. I like that. At night, I'd park near the water, sit in the truck, and breathe. She still called sometimes, left messages about how things were getting complicated at work. I didn't reply. She wasn't talking to her husband anymore. She was talking to the echo of someone who used to solve her problems. Now, that echo was gone, and the silence it left behind was louder than any answer I could give. Word spreads fast in small cities, especially when someone's fall looks interesting. By the time I came back into town for a meeting, her name was already circling through whispers and half-smiles. The story had changed versions so many times that no one knew what was real anymore, but everyone agreed on one thing. She wasn't the golden agent she used to be. I stopped by a cafe one morning, not the one she used to visit with him, but close enough. I overheard two women from her office talking quietly. They mentioned that Greg was under review and that Emma had been too close to him for comfort. They didn't sound cruel, just cautious, like people protecting their distance. That's when I realized she wasn't being exposed. She was being excluded. I didn't smile. I didn't feel triumph. It was strange watching it all collapse without lifting a finger. I just sat there, drinking my coffee, knowing this wasn't revenge, it was balance. Later that week, she showed up at the construction site. I saw her car parked on the edge of the lot, but I didn't walk over. She stood there for a while, watching me give instructions to the crew. When I finally turned, our eyes met for the first time in weeks. She looked polished, like she'd dressed for control. But her voice cracked when she said she just wanted to talk. I told her I was busy and that she could call. She said she already had, and I hadn't answered. I nodded. That was the end of it. That evening, a mutual friend called to tell me she'd had a rough day. Apparently, she'd been asked to take a leave of absence while the company sorted things out. Her world, built on charm and leverage, was finally slipping. When I got home, the apartment was quiet. The lights were still set the way she liked them, warm and low. I poured myself a drink and sat in the silence she used to fill with noise. For the first time, it didn't feel heavy. It just felt honest. She had wanted attention. Instead, she found absence. And that was something she couldn't control. The thing about silence is that it changes people. It doesn't just fill space, it reshapes it. A month had passed since I left, and I could feel her trying to find me in every small trace I'd left behind. She started texting again, softer now, asking if I was eating well, if I was sleeping enough. The tone wasn't demanding anymore. It was searching, but I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She wasn't looking for me. She was looking for the version of herself that existed when I was still in the room. At night, I'd sit in the truck outside the new build, watching the framework rise piece by piece. It reminded me of something steady, something real. Every beam, every nail, it was work that didn't lie. When the world around you collapses, honest work becomes its own form of prayer. I heard from a mutual friend that she was spending most of her time alone now. No more work events, no more lunches with Greg. He had resigned quietly, moved states. She stayed, pretending it was by choice. She'd been the center of every conversation once. Now people avoided eye contact. Social isolation happens fast when status is borrowed. I imagined her in the evenings, sitting on the couch with the same Netflix shows we used to watch together. The glow from the TV against her face, the faint sound of laughter from characters that didn't exist. Maybe she replayed our old life in her head, scene by scene, trying to find the moment it all shifted. She wouldn't find it, because it wasn't one moment. It was a slow fade she never noticed until it was too quiet to ignore. One afternoon, I saw her name flash on my phone again. I let it ring, then fade to voicemail. I listened later. She didn't sound angry anymore, just small. She said she missed us, that she didn't realize what she'd been building was temporary. I didn't delete the message. I just turned off the phone and went back to work. The sky was darkening, and the structure in front of me stood tall, solid. It hit me then. What I was building wasn't just for a client. It was the blueprint of my new life, one without her name on the foundation. It was late September when she finally showed up again. I was leaving the site, dust on my hands, my mind clear from a full day of work. Her car was parked by the fence, engine running but headlights off. She stepped out, dressed too neatly for a construction lot, holding herself like she still believed appearances could fix anything. I didn't move toward her. She spoke first, her voice low, trembling between pride and panic. She said she'd made mistakes, that she'd let career noise get in the way. She said she didn't want to lose me, that we could start over. I didn't respond right away. I let the air settle between us, heavy but honest. I looked at her, not with anger, not with nostalgia, just awareness. She was standing in front of a version of me she no longer recognized. The man who used to rush to comfort her was gone. The man standing there had learned the value of withholding. She waited, searching my face for something, regret, emotion, any hint that she still mattered the way she once did. I gave her none of it. Finally, I said I was glad she was okay. Nothing more. No promises. Her eyes filled, not with tears, but with realization. She said I'd changed. I told her maybe she was just seeing me clearly for the first time. She tried to reach out, her hand brushing my arm, but I stepped back. Not in anger, in boundary. That's what she'd never understood. Distance isn't punishment. It's protection. She stood there for a while, like she expected me to break the silence. But I didn't. I opened the truck door, started the engine, and waited. She finally turned, walked back to her car, and drove off into the fading light. That night, I sat at IHOP again, same booth as before. The waitress remembered me. She asked if I wanted my usual. I nodded. The comfort was in the consistency. While I ate, I thought about how sometimes the loudest statement a man can make is choosing not to say anything at all. By the time I finished my coffee, I realized something simple. She had come looking for forgiveness. But what she really found was closure, and it wasn't mine to give. After that night, she stopped showing up. No calls, no texts, just silence, the kind that comes when someone finally understands they've lost access. For a while, I wondered if I'd feel relief, or pride, or maybe even regret. But all I felt was balance. My life had order again. The noise was gone. I spent my mornings on site, afternoons drafting new designs, evenings at the same quiet booth in IHOP. Routine became peace. Then, out of nowhere, I started hearing things, small echoes of her collapse drifting through mutual friends. She'd left the agency, mutually agreed to step back. Greg had disappeared completely, moved across the country. Her apartment lease was ending, and she was struggling to find a new place. Someone mentioned she was selling her car. Another said she'd been trying to reach me again, just to talk. But I didn't pick up. One night, I got home to find a letter wedged in my door. Not handwritten, typed. Clean, formal, desperate between the lines. She said she finally understood what she'd traded away, that she'd mistaken my steadiness for weakness, my silence for disinterest. She said she saw now that I was the only one who built while everyone else just sold. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer next to the keys. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't answer either. The next day, I went to Home Depot for supplies. I passed the aisle where we used to shop together, the one where she'd scroll Amazon while I compared tools. For the first time, the memory didn't sting. It just existed, like part of a blueprint that had already been built over. Later that week, I heard she'd moved back to her sister's place, trying to start fresh. Maybe she will. I don't wish her failure. I just know I won't be part of her rebuild. At night, I stood by the window, looking at the reflection of my truck in the driveway. It wasn't just a vehicle anymore. It was a reminder that movement doesn't need noise. You can drive forward without ever looking back. And sometimes, the most powerful thing a man can do is nothing. A few weeks later, she came by one last time. No warning. I heard the soft knock on the door just after sunset, the hour when the world goes quiet before night takes over. I opened it to find her standing there, smaller somehow, the confident posture gone. She wasn't dressed for attention anymore. No bright lipstick, no perfect hair. Just a sweater and tired eyes. She said she didn't expect me to let her in. I didn't answer, but I stepped aside anyway. Inside, she looked around like she was walking through a memory. Everything was the same, yet none of it belonged to her anymore. The plants she'd once overwatered were thriving. The walls she said were too bare now looked deliberate, calm. She stood in the middle of the room and whispered that she missed it. Missed me. I didn't move closer. I just listened. She talked about how she'd been humbled, how everything she'd built on appearances had collapsed, how she'd realized that I'd never needed to raise my voice to make a point. I stayed quiet. Words weren't my language anymore. Actions were. Finally, she asked if there was any way back. Not pleading, just broken in that soft, human way that comes when pride burns out. I looked at her and said the truth. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. She nodded slowly, and I could see the understanding in her eyes. It wasn't anger that broke her, it was recognition. She turned to leave, pausing at the door like she wanted to say something else, but didn't. The sound of her footsteps faded down the hall, each one lighter than the last. I stood there for a long moment, breathing in the silence. Then I walked to the kitchen, poured a cup of coffee, and sat by the window. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant stars. I thought about everything that had happened, and how sometimes losing someone isn't a tragedy, it's a turning point. She had built her world on transactions. I built mine on intention. And in the end, that made all the difference. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe, it only gets stronger from here.